Wilds of Eldraine is Magic's next set, and every single pack has something called an Enchanting Tale, which is a really awesome enchantment reprint from Magic's history in this brand new frame. It doesn't change legality, so these aren't going into standard, but I thought it'd be really interesting to look at the top 10 most expensive Enchanting Tales in the set, so that you know exactly what to look for when you're opening packs. Alrighty, let's jump into this, starting with number 10, which is Repercussion. It's currently going for $14.99, and it's a 3-cost red enchantment that says, whenever a creature is dealt damage, Repercussion deals that much damage to that creature's controller. The idea is if your creatures are taking damage, the controller of that creature will too, and it can mean games will end fairly quickly because this is a universal effect that affects your creatures and your opponents. This card isn't necessarily insanely good in any format, but it's only ever been printed in Urza's Destiny and a random secret layer, so it really hasn't seen a ton of printings, meaning the supply is pretty low. What that means is that typically cards like these are going to really crash in price, so if you're wanting one yourself, I'd recommend just waiting because they're probably going to go way down in price. Alrighty, next up, number 9 is Aggravated Assault. Currently also going for $14.99, it is also a 3-cost red enchantment, but this one lets you pay 5 mana to get an extra combat step and untap all your creatures. This card is very similar to Repercussion, where it was printed in Onslaught and then has only been printed in weird side things. You know, it was an Invocation and Amonkhet, but those weren't very common. It was in Explorers of Ixalan, but that didn't sell very well, and it was in a secret layer, which just doesn't add a ton of quantity. So it really hasn't seen a mass reprint really ever, and so this will be the first time, so I do expect the price to fall on it. But unlike Repercussion, Aggravated Assault is a better card. It goes in a lot more decks, especially in Commander, as, you know, commanders that have attack triggers or just want to even untap can use this in red, and it's a pretty good and unique effect. It's kind of hard to consistently just get tons of extra combats, and this is one of the cards that can actually do that. So it's really cool, and I think that it is going to, you know, drop decently in price, but it should maintain a, you know, a decent price just because the card itself is decently good. Next up, number 8 is Greater Auramancy. It's currently going for $15.99, and it's a 2-cost white enchantment that says other enchantments you control have Shroud, and enchanted creatures you control have Shroud. This is an enchantment that makes other enchantments harder to hit, so it's really good if your deck cares about enchantments, plus it's only 2 mana, so as a card it is decently good, but it's only ever been printed in Shadowmoor and as a Judge gift card, so really hasn't seen a reprint ever, and so again I expect this one to crash pretty hard just like the previous two. You'll notice that there are a lot of things on this list that haven't been reprinted a ton, and I think that's because the bonus slot really enables some awesome reprints that are hard to do. You know, a card like this has to go in a set that cares about enchantments, but it also may be too good for something like Standard, and so this is a way to get, you know, reprints out in $4 boosters without necessarily having to affect Standard or, you know, Pioneer or any of the formats where this could become a problem, or, you know, it just may not work that well within the set. So I think, you know, the bonus sheet is a really great thing, and Greater Auramancy, Repercussion, and Aggravated Assault are all going to drop to really reasonable prices because of it, so I'm really excited about that. Next up, number 7 is Smothering Tithe. This card's currently going for $17.99, and I think we all know what it does, but it is a 4-cost white enchantment that has you create a treasure every time an opponent draws a card unless that player pays 2. This card, unlike the previous ones, has seen a ton of reprints, but is expensive because it's insanely good. Almost every white deck in Commander is going to want this, but it was originally in Ravnica Allegiance, which isn't that old of a set. It did go a little while without getting reprinted, but then it was in, you know, Double Masters 2022 last year. It was a Judge promo. It was in Commander Masters literally a month ago, and now it's being reprinted again. So the price on it has really dropped. At one point, this card was going for like 60, 70 bucks a piece, and it is down to 18 bucks, which is really great. It's great to see that reprints work. You know, it's still a fairly expensive card. Paying 18 bucks for just one piece of cardboard is still kind of insane, but I expect the price not only to fall more, but it also means if you open a Wilds of Eldraine pack, you know, even in your pre-release pool, there's a chance you just pull a Smothering Tithe, and it lets you play the game with the cards you want to play with. Although I don't know if more Smothering Tides is a good thing. It is a very annoying card. Next up, number 6 is Bitterblossom, also going for $17.99. This is another really insane enchantment. It's a 2-cost black enchantment that has you, at the beginning of your upkeep, lose a life and create a 1/1 black fairy rogue token with flying. This is just really good. For 2 mana, every turn you're getting a 1/1, and especially in formats like Commander or older formats where life doesn't necessarily matter as much, this can get you a ton of value, whether it be in a, you know, go wide token deck, a flyers deck, or where it's often found aristocrat decks where you're gonna take that 1/1 and sacrifice it to maybe even gain that life back and deal damage to your opponents. This is just a card that a lot of decks are wanting, and it's seen a number of reprints. It was in Modern Masters 2015, it was in Ultimate Masters, it was in Double Masters 2022, and it is again seeing a reprint here, although this is the first time it's been reprinted in like a standard booster pack in a very, very long time. So I expect the price will crash on this harder than it has previously, because it's, you know, been Mythics and Master sets, which are much more expensive compared to something like Wilds of Eldraine, which again is only $4 a pack. Next up, number 5 is Land Tax. This card is currently going for $19.99, and it's a 1-cost white enchantment that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you may search your library for up to 3 basic land cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand, then shuffle. So essentially, you get to draw 3 basics at your upkeep if an opponent controls more lands than you. This is a very powerful card, especially because it only costs 1 mana, and it's currently going for 20 bucks, although that is down from its price because it has seen a decent number of reprints. This is a really old card that actually saw a lot of reprints, back in the day, and then it was printed in Battle Bond, Double Masters, and Commander Masters, so in recent times, it's seen a decent number of reprints, and it's another one of those awkward enchantments that's in both Commander Masters and in this slot, which is really good because it does, do the double reprint thing where the price on it's going to crash, meaning more people can get their hands on it. This does feel a little bit like old Commander. I'm not saying this card is bad, it is definitely really, really good, but just getting the cards into your hand doesn't feel that great unless your commander has something that wants you to discard cards or lets you put lands from your hand on the battlefield, but in which case typically green can do it better. It's just a weird card where I don't know necessarily where it's seeing play in Commander, because I often find myself not wanting to put it in decks because I feel like there are just better options even for white at this point. So I feel like it's one of those cards that's expensive because it historically has been, and it is still decently good. I feel like it's going to never recover from this double reprint, as it sees not only less play in Commander, but also just had this giant reprinting. Alright, next up we have number 4, that being Primal Vigor, which is currently going for $19.99. This is a 5-cost green enchantment that says if 1 or more tokens would be created, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. Then, if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. This is like a, universal doubling season where it affects everyone's board, so if your opponent creates tokens, they get to create twice as many as well, and if they put +1/+1 counters, they get to do that as well. It also only applies to +1/+1 counters on creatures, where doubling season doubles all sorts of counters, so it is clearly a worse doubling season, but it's still a very powerful effect, and it doesn't really have a great amount of supply. It was originally printed in Commander 2013, which compared to a standard booster set means there's a lot less quantity out there, and then it was reprinted in The List, which really doesn't bring down the price by that much, and as a random secret layer drop. So this is the first time it's been in a booster pack product outside of The List, and so I expect the price on this one to drop pretty drastically. It already kind of has. These are all pre-order prices, just to let you all know, and it's already almost halved in price from the original pre-order prices. So this is one that I would expect to continue dropping because it is, there are functionally better cards than this. Doubling season is just better in every way outside of maybe some weird niche scenario where you're making your opponents create tokens or something weird, or outside of something weird like that, there's just a better version of this card, but it's about that redundancy that in a commander deck you could run this and Parallel Lives and doubling season, and you could run all of these effects. That is why it is expensive. So I do expect it'll drop, but still stay, probably the $10 range, because this is still a fairly good card. Next up, we're busting into the top 3 with the 3rd most expensive Enchanting Tale, that being Rhystic Study. This is a card that a lot of people know, and it's currently going for $34.99. This is a Commander staple. When you think of Commander, you think of Sol Ring and probably Rhystic Study, because this card is very, very good. It's a 3-cost blue enchantment that says whenever an opponent plays a spell, they may pay 1. If they don't, you get to draw a card. This, for 3 mana, often draws you a lot of cards, and even if your opponents decide to pay every time, it's a 3-cost enchantment that says your opponent's spells cost 1 more to cast, which is still really, really good. And even though it's a Commander staple, it wasn't in Commander Masters, and it really hasn't been in a full booster product in quite some time. Yes, it was in Jumpstart, and it was in Jumpstart 2022, and a random list slot, and a random secret layer, but those all add very little to the supply of Rhystic Studies, which means there just hasn't been a ton of them. So it's a staple that really hasn't been reprinted, so the price has been quite high on it. I actually don't see this going down too much more, because again, every blue Commander deck is pretty much gonna want to run this card, and it's a mythic in the set, so it is going to add a lot of supply, and I mean a lot of supply, but it's not going to drop to below $10. Typically we find that with the mythics, the prices on them about halve. Ragavan was $75-$80, he's now floating around $35-$40 last time I checked, so expect this to drop to $17, $18, $20, somewhere in that range, but it's still not going to be an incredibly cheap card. Next up, it's a card I've actually already mentioned here. It is Parallel Lives, currently going for $34.99. It's a 4-cost green enchantment that says if an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead. This is an insanely powerful card that wants to go in any deck that's creating tokens, whether those be creature tokens or treasure tokens or clues or whatever type of token you're wanting to create. For just 4 mana, getting to double it up is really powerful. Mix that with the fact that it's really never been reprinted. It was originally printed in Innistrad, like original Innistrad, and then it was a Judge promo card, but outside of that, it hasn't seen a paper printing, so this is its first time since Innistrad being in booster packs. So this is a card that is incredibly powerful, that hasn't seen a ton of reprints, and so it is one of the most expensive cards from the set in general. It's very good, very powerful. I would expect it to drop a little bit more than something like Rhystic Study, just because it is a issue of supply in a lot of cases, because it only had that original printing and then the one really hard to get promo. So because of that, it's going to drop a little bit more because it is more of a problem of supply than necessarily demand, but it's a card with low supply and that's very powerful, and that is the combination for an expensive card. And finally, number 1, the most expensive enchanting tale in the set, it is Doubling Season. It's currently going for $39.99, and it's a 5-cost green enchantment that says, if an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice as many of those tokens instead, and if an effect would put 1 or more counters on a permanent you control, it puts twice that many of those counters on that permanent instead. We've seen Primal Vigor, we've seen Parallel Lives. This is the best version of the card. It is a 5-drop, but it's going to double all your tokens, double all your counters, and pretty much any deck that has tokens or counters is going to want to run this card. It was nearing $100 at the beginning of this year, but it was reprinted in Commander Masters and then again in the Enchanting Tale slot, so it's bringing it down to this $40 pre-order price. I expect that'll fall a little bit more, but I don't expect it to fall too much more on top of that, because this is a card that is very powerful, and a lot of decks are going to want to run it. So if you pull this, congratulations, you won the Wilds of Eldraine lottery. Well, kind of. And the reason I say kind of is that there are these anime style and confetti foil versions of these enchanting tales that I didn't talk about in this video. Typically my top 10 videos are reserved for the base versions, not foil versions or alternate arts or anything like that. If you want to see a video where I talk about the anime styling and the confetti foiling and talking about what is actually the most expensive card in general in Wilds of Eldraine, in any version, any foiling, any of that, let me know in the comments down below or like this video. If you want to see more content from me, check out this video where I talked about the top 10 most expensive cards from the main set of Wilds of Eldraine, or check out this video where I talk about what's in a collector booster and what cool treatments you can find in there. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.